Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello and welcome to episode 4. I hope you are doing really well today, and I hope this episode makes you just that much more well. Thank you so much for being here today. And remember to click subscribe if you haven't already. I am doing so great. I'm really happy at the moment because I have a visitor recording me. It's my cat. Oh my, she's jumped up. I think she wants to say hello. It's fun to have company. And, I'm doing really well. And I say that with this visitor, but also while I'm feeling some human feelings. I just before popping on to talk with you, I got an email about some sad news in my community. And, I just instantly felt those tears welling right up. I felt really sad. And, I'm still feeling a residue of that, but my heart is also feeling, expanded. And like, I don't know, I'm just feeling so much compassion and love for those people who are going through a really hard something, like so many of us are. And it's kind of what I want to talk about today, that these emotions that we have, and especially as highly sensitive people, we have emotions so strongly. I mean, many of you will relate to tears springing to your eyes when you read bad news, right? But our emotions are part of life, right? They're part of being a human being. They're part of love. They're part of relationships, right? We can't avoid them. But we can really learn to relate to them in ways that make them so much easier, right? So I can feel sad and at the same time feel love, for example, right? And I promise to share so much more about relating well to our feelings. And we're going to dive more into that today. But, the reality is that real life is happening right here in your marriage, right? And what I really want to focus on today is having sensitivity to that, being sensitive to our own selves in our lives, in our marriages. It's so key, right? Because we all have hard times. And if you're listening to this podcast, you may be having or going through a harder time than some people, right? At the moment, you might be feeling bad. And that's totally normal, right? I mean, obviously there's times when things are harder and times when things are less hard. But for you right now, perhaps you're feeling alone when you want to be feeling connected and supported. Or maybe you're going through a time of feeling really annoyed a lot and perhaps worrying about the effects that will have on, or that is having on your relationship, or worrying that it means something bad about your marriage or you, right? Or maybe you're fighting a lot or having a lot of tension, or maybe you're just feeling really uninterested in being around your husband, right? And that maybe worries you, or just it doesn't feel right? Like, aren't we supposed to love the person we're with, right? Or maybe you feel hurt often. I hear that a lot. I feel unloved. I feel he doesn't care, right? Those are normal human emotions that might be coming up for you in your marriage. You might be feeling resentful, right? That's a biggie, because maybe you feel like you're pulling more weight. He isn't giving as much. Or maybe you feel guilty about something, many things. Or maybe you feel angry a lot, right? Maybe you worry that this relationship isn't going to make it, right? So many emotions, so many hard, challenging emotions come up in our marriages, right? These are the kinds of things, these feelings, I hear people have them all the time in my work with clients, right? It's normal and it's painful. And it's certainly not what we were hoping to be experiencing the majority of the time in our marriages, right? It's not what we signed up for per se when we got married. So what I want you to know is that you actually have some major sway over this. Okay, you have some major sway over how you feel, and you do have so much sway in the relationship. You do affect the relationship. We women, we human beings, we influence greatly our relationship, way more than we might think, right? We influence on our own the dynamic in our relationship. So I am going to go into this much more in depth because being really clear about this is so powerful. Like knowing this really can be so powerful and can change things so quickly and deeply in your marriage. Right? So I'm going to go more depth into it next time so that you can really start to step into that powerful place. And I'll be giving you specific tools and ways to think about this, or think about things so that will help you have this way more power, right? Way more influence over how you feel in your marriage and how things go in your marriage, right? So I'll talk about that in the next episode, and for sure, like ongoingly. So important. But right now, I just want to share a little story about it, just to kind of illustrate how this could be true, how one person can affect the relationship, the interactions that we have with each other so deeply. So I'm just going to illustrate it with a story about my husband being late. So imagine that I'm having a bad day, like maybe I'm having a hormonal day, PMS, maybe for some reason had a bad day, feeling lots of stress, like maybe had a big list of things to do, didn't have any alone time, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed and stressed, okay? Then my husband comes home 20 minutes after he said he'd get there, right? I'm trying to cook dinner. The kids are like pulling at my legs, fighting with each other, right? And he walks in and I look at him and I'm like, why are you late? You should have told me, right? So I get frustrated, angry, and I snap at him, right? And then he snaps at me, right? Says something like, well, I don't know what he says, but he snaps back, right? And that just adds to the stress. So now I have a husband who's frustrated, a me who's frustrated, and it's all just that much worse, okay? The evening you can imagine that the evening might even go downhill from there, yeah? Okay, so I want you to compare that to a totally new scene where I'm feeling good. Like I had a good day, I'm feeling grounded and relaxed, and it's like 6 p.m. and he was supposed to be home at 5 p.m. And I've been wondering where he is, right? The phone rings and he's like, oops, Han, I got on the highway, like going the wrong way on my way home from work. And I drove an hour south instead of coming an hour or coming north to home, right? So I'm going to be like another hour and a half. Okay. This is a true story. Crack me up. So, but that's the thing. Like, it could be funny to me because I was feeling good, right? I could laugh and make light of that, right? I could even easily forgive him and I could even make a joke about it. And when he does get home, I can laugh about it and greet him with a smile, and we can giggle together and have a fine, nice, even connected, fun night together. Right? So can you see how same situation pretty much, right? Like husband's late. But I had a totally different experience because I was feeling very differently. And so that difference in me created a different outcome, right? It affected the interaction. First example, snappy interaction, more tension, right? More distance. Second example, connection and lightness, right? Was the outcome. Fascinating. Yeah, we have so much sway, and it comes down to what we're feeling. Okay? I mean, so much of it is driven by how we're feeling. So when we're bogged down by stress, when we're having heavy emotions, any kind of like strong negative emotions, it will definitely make it harder in our relationship, right? Have you ever noticed yourself how when you're doing not so well, you're not in such a great mood, like you're grouchy or irritated or whatever, it affects your marriage, it affects your partner. And when you're doing well, when you're happy, when you're calm, it affects you in the way that you interact with him and even how he then responds to you. If you haven't really clearly noticed that, I'd love for you to just be curious about that this week. Just pay attention to how that could be true, or maybe try to think of times that was true. So interesting to see. But again, how you feel is the driver of that. Our emotions actually lead to our actions. Our emotions are the fuel that create our actions. And our actions lead to how our interactions go, lead to the outcome, lead to the results that we get. Okay? So how we feel is so important. Right? And it's extra especially true for those of us who are highly sensitive, who are deep feeling people. Because we do have so much emotion, right? So here's the thing that's so important. We often think that our feelings come from outside of us. That they're like a result, like a direct result of someone else's actions or their lack of action, right? Like if your husband doesn't say hello when he comes in the door, you feel sad. It feels like he did that to you, right? So an example is a fun example is a client, one of my clients, when we first started working together, her partner would come in and not hug her right away, right? Or during the day, he wouldn't text her. And well, let's just use the example of the hug. So he wouldn't hug her necessarily right when he got in the door. And so if there was no hug, she would be sad, right? And if there was a hug, for some reason, he actually did hug her when he first walked in, she would be happy, right? And so that was how she came to me. That's how most of us feel. It's like, oh, he does something and I feel this way. That's how my feelings are caused. Okay? And it makes sense that we think this. It's what we're taught. And it's, we're taught that loving feelings come from outside of us and, hard feelings too. But as babies, that is where love came from, right? Love and nurturance, it came from our parents, hopefully. I mean, for most of us, for many of us, obviously there's definitely times when our parents weren't great caregivers and yeah, but still we didn't have an internal source of that. It just, the nurturance was given, right? Or not given, but it was from outside. So that experience of like, oh, love comes from outside has us relying still on the other person for love or for whatever the feeling is that we have, right? It has, and it also, side note, is that it has us oftentimes trying to control our partner so that we can feel loved. Right? So like in the example of the hug, my client who wanted the hug, like an example of trying to control would be like telling him that he needs to hug her when she walks in the door so that she can feel loved, right? Trying to get the feeling that she wants, love, by demanding that her partner do something differently. Okay. the thing is, and we'll get way into this, unfortunately, we cannot control others. We can't rely on controlling them so that we can have the feelings we want, right? That actually usually backfires. It usually makes things worse. We do not have control over other adults, our husbands. And I want you to believe me because I have tried so hard. I've definitely came into this world a little bit of a control freak. But I have found that I cannot control my husband. I can't program him like a robot. I thought about giving him a lobotomy. Thought about duct taping his mouth. But no, right? I'm not going to do that. And when I do try to control him, and this is true for so many of us, you might be resonating with this, it backfires. He digs his heels in more. It actually sends him scurrying in the opposite direction or not doing the thing that I want him to even more. Okay. So side note, we can't control others. So if we can't do that and we can't rely on other people for doing exactly what we want to do all the time, how do we deal? Right? Well, for one, I want to say, luckily we are not kids anymore. So we don't have to go about it that way by relying on something outside of us to create the feelings we want, right? We're actually very strong adults. You're a strong adult. You're becoming more and more mature by the day. And as you do that, you actually have more and more sway over your feelings, right? Emotional maturity. You're maturing more and more. And as you mature more emotionally, that means you actually have more sway over your feelings, okay? More influence. You actually get to control your feelings, to put it sort of simply. So, and that is really the ticket. Learning or just remembering that you actually have that agency, right? That you yourself are a primary source of your feelings, and that you can use that ability to be in charge of your feelings, to feel better yourself in your marriage, and ultimately change the dynamic in your marriage. Okay. So the key is to turn towards yourself. Your power is in you. Okay. In you. There are so many ways that we can learn inside of ourselves to guide our emotions, to relate to our emotions well, and feel so much better, so much more peaceful, even with the hard emotions that come up, right? Like I started this podcast, I was like, I just checked this email and I was feeling sad, right? I can feel peaceful about feeling sad, right? So that starts in me. I'm the only one who can control that. And one of the big ways that we have this kind of emotional maturity, this kind of emotional agency, is we give ourselves the sensitivity we're looking for, right? Instead of waiting for other people to give ourselves sensitivity, we start with giving ourselves the sensitivity, the care, right? We talked about what sensitivity means really in the last episode, the power, the beauty of sensitivity. We give that to ourselves, right? And I want you to make sure you understand, I'm not saying we should never derive nourishment from our relationship. Of course we do, and we should. And you can absolutely derive love and support and nourishment and all the good stuff from your relationship. But I'm saying that if that's the only way you know how to feel loved, or love, or, those good emotions, then we create dependency, right? We create a neediness. We end up perhaps trying to control, like I was just talking about. We end up in a power struggle. We end up doing things that actually erode connection and love, right? And that bring a whole lot of extra pain and unnecessary suffering. Okay? So, right now, I want to give you something concrete to sink your teeth into, right? A way of giving yourself some sensitivity. And again, when I say sensitivity, what I'm really talking about is attention, care, compassion, right? So I call this little process that I'm going to offer you right now, and I'm just going to give you a little taste, not the super in-depth version of this, but I call this wink. Kind of cute, right? It's like giving yourself a wink, and it's an acronym for witness, investigate, normalize, and comfort. So it's wink with a C, W-I-N-C. Right? And wink is about really meeting yourself where you are, whatever feelings you're having, meeting those feelings, right? And it's especially good, of course, for like not necessarily when you're feeling good, right? But when you're having any emotion that doesn't feel so great, right? Annoyance, sadness, loneliness, resentment, anger, etc., right? It's really about giving direct care to yourself. And it's something that I have found so powerful in my life. I use it, if not daily, then multiple times a week, right? Because I have feelings. I'm a human being. I use it when I have feelings around my relationship. More often, my big work in the world, my big growth in the world is around my business, and hard feelings come up around that. So I will use this as a go-to tool for me. I just had a client who I introduced this practice to a little bit more in depth just this past week. And she reported that it was the first time. So she used it out on her own. And she came back to me saying, it's the first time I've ever been able to totally self-soothe on my own instead of relying on that from someone else, right? That someone else who sometimes doesn't have it in him, right, to help her feel better, right? That's true of so many of our partners. Our partner doesn't always know how to make us feel better, right? He has his stuff going on. He has his emotions going on, right? So this is a great practice, especially if you're having hard emotions now and then, like any good, highly sensitive human or any human at all would. This will give you a little bit of a taste of how you actually have the power to shift your internal experience really quickly and give yourself the care that you might tend to look for from outside of you. Okay. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't look for care from outside of you at all, but I want you to be able to rely on yourself so well for that, because it's so freeing, so liberating, and so powerful to be able to do that for ourselves. So empowering. So this little practice wink might feel a little awkward to you at first. If you've never done anything like this, that's okay. Learning to walk feels awkward when we first try, right? Like anything new, it will feel easier and natural once you get used to doing it. Okay? Promise. It felt weird to me too at first. So I'm going to go through it somewhat quickly right now. And I invite you, if you want to sort of stretch it out and give it a little bit more time, that you just pause the podcast after I describe each step. Okay, so the first thing to do is witness. Okay, what I want you to do is just witness any feeling that you might be having. And this especially works best like when you have been having a hard feeling, right? So when that's happening, you can just simply ask yourself, what am I noticing? What's happening? Stepping into that part of you that can notice. Right? And when I say notice, when I say witness, that really means we're looking at what's going on with curiosity, with kindness, right? This isn't a judgmental witness, right? We're not a judge, right? We're literally looking at what's there. Okay, so I invite you to fill that ability to witness, to see what's going on, to notice what you're feeling with kindness. And then we're going to just take that a little bit deeper. We're going to investigate. I for investigate. You're going to investigate how that feels. What does that feeling that you're having feel like? What's it like in your body? Your body is the display of emotions. It's where the emotions exist, right? So notice, where is that feeling strongest in your body? Is it open? Is it closed? Is it tense? Is it expansive? Is it heavy, right? Just let whatever's there, be there. Stay looking at it from this curiosity, right? Just noticing and exploring what it feels like. Not trying to change it. Not trying to make it go away. Not resisting. Just allowing. All right. And the next step is to normalize. That's the N. So I invite you to just remind yourself that having these feelings is a normal part of being human. And right now, as you're experiencing these feelings, there are probably many, maybe thousands of other human beings experiencing the same sort of feelings. It's totally normal, totally human to feel what you're feeling. Just notice what it's like to recognize that. And then we'll move on to the C for comfort. I want you to actually internally ask yourself, what do I need right now? What words do I need to hear? What would be comforting to share with myself, to tell myself? How could I reassure myself right now? And then I invite you to actually offer yourself those words. And you can just do that internally inside your own head, right? So this can be as simple as like, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay. You always make it through these feelings. They always fade away. Right? For me, one of the ways I like to think about this is I like to treat myself the way I would a dear friend, right? The way I would a dear true friend. And tell myself things like, I'm here for you, right? Like, oh, I'm here for you, honey, right? It's gonna be okay. And you can get really creative with this. There's so many, like really, if you ask that question, what words do I most need to hear right now? And then offer them to yourself, like so many possibilities are there, right? There's so much room for ways that you could encourage and comfort and reassure yourself. Okay? So if you haven't done that last step, I invite you to pause the podcast and really do that, or pause the podcast and do that whole thing. And then I want you to just notice if anything's shifted or how things have shifted. For me and for my clients who've reported into me about this, the difference is substantial. There's so much more lightness. There's so much less bogged down feeling by heavy emotion, right? There's so much less just of that, like, whatever, of the like intense feeling. It's replaced by maybe calm, maybe even sweetness, maybe even love. So I want you to just explore this, if you're open to it, should you choose to, experiment with this for at least the next week until our next episode, really focusing on giving yourself this kind of sensitivity, this kind of care. And I advise you to try this practice specifically a bunch of times. You'll get more used to it. It will start to feel even more effective. And tailor it to yourself for sure. Make it work for you. And I will share that there's other ways to be sensitive to yourself, of course, right? And I'm going to go into so many other ways and things you can do over time. But a couple other brief ones are this. Self-care, okay? Highly sensitive people, if you've been learning about highly sensitive people, you'll know self-care is huge, right? And there are some distinctions between real self-care and sort of, like surface self-care. I'd like to just, for right now, I like to just define self-care as anything that actually really helps you relax and decompress and unwind, right? Some ways are so much more effective than others. Obviously meditation is a great one for some people. Even, exercise can stimulate and then help you relax after. I love deep breathing practices. That's one of my go-tos. I love yoga nidra. There's so many great things to help our systems unwind. Okay. And alone time is also huge. Just taking some time for sensitive people, like taking time away from other noises, so important. So my invitation to you, if you're not going to practice wink, or even if you are, I invite you to increase your focus on self-care and time alone, okay? Or time alone, same thing, over this week, all right? And notice what that does, how that affects how you feel. And then, of course, the ramifications, the effect, the impact, that's the word I'm looking for, that you feeling different has on your interactions with your husband, all right? Another quick thing you can do to add more sensitivity to yourself into your life is asking yourself a question like this. How can I care for myself here? Right? When something comes up, when you're having a harder time, when you're feeling stressed, whatever, how can I care for myself here? Such an easy, simple question, right? When you ask a good question like that, your wise part, like you are a wise human, right? You are. As a sensitive being, I know you're wise. So your wiseness, your wisdom will come out, right? Your brain will come up with something to answer that question. One of my clients recently asked herself this question: how can I care for myself here? Or some version of that question. And her answer was just like, tonight I'm going to watch a movie by myself, drink a glass of wine, put my feet up. It's going to be a funny movie. And she did it. And she felt great. She laughed. And it allowed her to relax. And, because she had been having a hard time because her partner was like very absent for a couple of weeks because he was really busy with a deadline. So doing that for herself allowed her to feel good and made it easy for her to give her man the space he needed to do that work, right? And without her feeling abandoned or not important to him, which is a thing that she's been working with, right? So it was a win-win, right? Just by asking that question, how can I care for myself here? And then taking action on the answer, right? Implementing the answer that you get from your own brain. All right. So again, I don't want you to necessarily just take my word for it that you're going to feel that your relationship will shift. Little moments will start shifting in your relationship when you're feeling different. I want you to actually try it, right? I want you to see for yourself that your interactions will change with your partner, with your husband, when you change how you feel inside yourself. Okay. So go ahead and go try it. Explore this. Let this be the theme of your week if you'd like. All right. And I look forward, hey, shoot me an email. Let me know how it's going. Always love to hear from you. And hey, if you want to take this work deeper and learn how to truly have deep sway over your own feelings, how loved, how much love you feel, how good you feel, how much peace you feel around those harder human emotions, and you really want to experience how much power you do have to transform and impact your marriage in a really positive way so that it starts to feel better and better, I invite you to consider working one-on-one with me. That's what we do deeply when we work together, when you come coach with me. So if you are interested in learning more and getting started, just email me, hannah@lifeisworthloving.com. I'll put that email address in the show notes. And just reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in setting up a time to talk about that. And we'll take it from there together. All right. I hope you have a fabulous week. Be oh so well.